That seemed like a lot of damage. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about my Cold Twister Invoker. This build is a great combination of speed, damage, map clear, and fun. This build went through many iterations. Thank you to Muppeteers for the inspiration. And ultimately we came up with a build that features some clever uses of intended game mechanics, as well as a very powerful skill in Twister. We are making the most of the Invoker Ascendancy that provides a lot of value to this build, and we will go through all of those things. There is a max roll planner attached in the description below, so check that out. It's going to have all of the details. I'm not going to talk about every single item and gem in this video, so we can keep it short, but everything you need should be in there. And if you need any more assistance, stop by my Twitch, twitch.tv/AER0__, and I will do my best to help you there. So, why Invoker? Invoker number 1 features I Am the Blizzard, which says gain 10% of damage as extra cold on freezing enemies you create chilled ground. So if you are using your whirling slash to move around / hit enemies and generate twisters, if you freeze an enemy with that, it'll create a chilled ground that will automatically allow your twisters to freeze. Generally, I use this to jump into a pack of enemies, and with 1, 2, or 3 hits, you will usually freeze some of the mobs in there. Now, you have to use whirling slash 3 times anyway in order to build up max twisters, so you're very likely to freeze white mobs. This can become a problem in really high deli content where you're not freezing as often, and therefore I Am the Blizzard is not going off. In order to counter that, you just need to get more damage. Unbound Avatar provides a 40% damage buff, as well as even more freezing and shocking on enemies. We'll get into the shocking later, but this is just a damage button that lasts quite a long time. Because we invest into skill effect duration, Unbound Avatar lasts over 14 seconds. In a lot of boss fights, that's more than enough to kill the whole boss. Sunder My Enemies allows critical hits to ignore non-negative enemy monster elemental resistance. Now this is for all hits, your spells, your attacks, and our goal is to get to maximum critical strike chance in order for this to apply all the time. With this, we don't have to invest in curses or exposure, and allows for us to scale any damage type we choose. So that means when you're running a burning ground or shocked ground map and your twisters are taking on the fire and lightning elements, you don't actually lose any damage. We don't really scale cold damage specifically. We just scale crits, we remove all enemy monster res, and then we scale all kinds of flat damage. All elemental flat damage is equally useful, with physical being only slightly less useful. Lastly, we take Scatter Them to the Winds, which gives elemental expression triggers on melee crit. Whirling Slash is a melee hit, which means that can trigger elemental expression. Now, elemental expression isn't doing a ton of damage for us, but we do have some shock and freeze related gems that we put in there, as this is our only source of shock and it can help freeze enemies. Now, here's the odd thing about elemental expression. It seems to be a clever use of intended game mechanics that elemental expression exclusively uses your second weapon set. This has to be a bug. It doesn't really make any sense. The way I found out was I put an effigy of cruelty in my offhand on the second weapon set in order to generate critical weakness, but it was going off when I didn't have my second weapon set active. So after a bunch of tests, it looks like elemental expression, which is a very bad skill for damage. I've tried to make it work. Even with the bug where you get to use an offhand weapon set specifically for it, it still doesn't do any damage. However, in this case, we don't have to weapon swap in order to get our effigy of cruelty to function because of this weird, clever use of intended game mechanics. And this allows us to also scale the levels of the elemental expression by putting a +5 wand in the offhand. This is not crucial for the build to function, but it did allow us to go for a little bit less critical strike on the tree and a little bit less on our spear, opening up some more flat damage. When this clever use of intended game mechanics is likely changed, we'll drop Scatter Them to the Winds and probably pick up the Soul Springs Eternal and then just manually hit Effigy of Cruelty on a boss. Okay, so enough about the Ascendancy. The tree is very straightforward. We take all of the evasion and energy shield nodes, we grab skill effect duration, all the crit we can, attack speed, generic attack damage, any movement speed where we can grab it. Super straightforward, nothing really to discuss there. Okay, let's talk about the gear really quick, specifically the spear. The spear, you're going to want to get enough crit chance, and you're going to only be able to check this in PoE, but you want to get enough crit chance in combat that you're crit capped with your Effigy of Cruelty up. So you have the Effigy of Cruelty here in the offhand. This is going to be going off every time that you Whirling Slash. Every time you Whirling Slash, you will be critically striking an enemy and you'll get your elemental expression to go off. So hit an enemy 3 times as you're warming up your twisters and you should be good to go. So for the spear, you want as much flat damage as you can get. Specifically, cold damage is mandatory. You need to get cold damage on your gear and on your weapon because you want your skills to be able to freeze by default before they get the extra damage that Twister gains from running over chilled ground. So Fizz is good, Lightning's good, Cold is number 1. Suffixes, crit multi, crit chance, attack speed, all nice. Now, a lot of this gear is relatively new, so the footage that you see may not have all of this gear in it. I've made a lot of changes to this build. I've tried a lot of different variations, and this is just where I've ended up. And some of this gear is pretty good. So the helmet, you want as much energy shield as possible, rarity, crit chance, and then any resistances you might need. In your offhand, you want to get spirit and intelligence, as well as getting it on a stoic scepter base for the discipline, because that's going to give us bonus energy shield. I got to 170 spirit on the offhand, and that gets me just enough to get to 270, which allows me to use all of my skills. The rings, you really want to focus on flat damage here. I have a really nice breach ring that I got very lucky. I actually hit this with a whittling and hit a second rarity roll, so it's got a ton of rarity and a ton of flat. Don't expect to get something this good, but this is effectively what you're shooting for. The other ring is very similar. It needed some dex. Again, we got that dead life roll on there, but all res, mana leech, you need at least 1 roll. I happen to have 2. You just need 1. In the chest, you want to get as much evasion and ES as possible, as well as good of suffixes as you can get for your build. You're going to need some stats. You're going to need some res. In the gloves, again, rarity, crit multi, attack speed, all good suffixes, cold damage for flat. These are really, really good gloves. You're not going to be able to do much better than these, but you also want energy shield on these as well. Boots, energy shield, rarity, and then good suffixes. Obviously, as much move speed as you can get is going to feel good. For the belt, you want to get 3 charm slots, number 1. And then number 2, as much resistance as possible. I would just create a search on the trade website that shows as much res as possible and 3 charm slots. Getting mana here on the prefix is nice, but it's not necessary. Any useful prefixes like charm duration, flask effect will be helpful, but worry about as much res as possible on this slot. It'll really open up other slots for damage, like these gloves. Don't have to have any res on them because I've solved it with the gloves. Because I've solved it with the belt, and I can go for pure damage. The amulet is a nice spot for fixing things. I grabbed a bunch of ES here, some rarity, crit chance, dex, and all res. You want to anoint subterfuge mask. It's super, super strong, particularly with a high ES helmet like this one. This is going to give us 900 flat evasion. For my charms, I'm going freeze immunity, ignite immunity, and stun immunity. The ignite one is super nice because we don't actually recharge on this build because we use Eternal Youth, which makes your flask really important. You want to get a good life flask that has a lot of extra amount recovered. You also want to make sure that you grab rage on melee hit in your gloves. Okay, let's quickly talk about the gems. Elemental expression, we are using things like overcharge, conduction, glaciation, just trying to get more shocks and freezes from this. We also use conk effect just for damage and inspiration to lower the cost. For our twister, we use Salvo number 1. This adds projectiles. Because you're not constantly spamming this skill, Salvo just adds a bunch of projectiles and makes this way, way stronger. We use Persistence for skill effect duration, Acceleration for projectile speed. This build has a ton of speed and effect duration, making our twisters really fast and last a very long time. We use Inevitable Critical because, again, we don't use the skill very often, so this should build up to at least 50, 75, or 100%. And then lastly, we use Blindside. It makes it so twisters can't blind. We get our blind from Whirling Slash. So if you've hit an enemy with Whirling Slash, it will blind them. As it says here, slowing enemies and blinding them in its area of effect. So as long as you're hitting an enemy with your Whirling Slash once every 4 seconds, which really only matters for bosses, they will always be blinded. You can replace Blindside with something else if you want your twisters to blind. It'll make mapping a little bit safer, but this is just what I'm using. Whirling Slash, we use Martial Tempo for attack speed. Pinpoint Critical gets us to 100% crit, so Whirling Slash never misses a crit. We get Ice Bite because we freeze often with Whirling Slash, and this gives us damage as extra cold for all of our skills, including our twisters. Magnified Effect for more area, so it's easier to hit enemies. And then Cold Infusion, which does lower our lightning damage a little bit, but gives us damage as extra cold, which is very, very strong for helping it freeze. The barrage is very self-explanatory. We're just trying to make it so that when we trigger our barrage, it's using as many charges as possible, but not counting them, using things like Perpetual Charge, Ingenuity for cooldown, and Arcane Tempo for a little bit of cast speed so it goes faster. In our cast on crit setup, this is super important. We use Sniper's Mark. Sniper's Mark is how we generate frenzies on single target. When we are critting enemies, which we are constantly doing, Sniper's Mark will be going off constantly. We also use Frostbolt in our cast on crit. This will assist in us getting chilled ground. When we crit an enemy with our Whirling Slash, again, we're always critting. It'll build up energy for this and trigger Frostbolts. I have this on a low level, so it doesn't cost too much mana. We have Impetus, Energy Retention, and Profusion. Profusion allows us to get additional charges from our Sniper's Mark. Herald of Thunder, very self-explanatory, just looking to get some extra damage. This is going off constantly when we're mapping. We're constantly killing shocked enemies, and this is just giving us extra bolts of lightning, which just do more lightning damage to enemies around us. For our aura type skills, we have Combat Frenzy, which is just passively generating us frenzies from freezing enemies, which we do all the time. Wind Dancer, which has a bunch of supports on it. We use Pin, Lockdown, Bludgeon, and Arm's Length. So this is going to knock back enemies and it's going to pin enemies. This setup is super strong. I love using Wind Dancer with these 4 links. You could also make it so Wind Dancer gets some extra cold damage, and then you could put something like Glaciation on it, but I prefer to use the knockback. We use Blink. This is not mandatory. You could put a Cast on Freeze setup here. You could add Herald of Ice in, which really isn't necessary, but I prefer the mobility of Blink, particularly on bosses. And lastly, we use Ghost Dance and Fast Forward. This gives us Ghost Shrouds, and because we have a ton of evasion, we recover a bunch of energy shield when we're hit while using the skill. So that's going to be it. This build was a ton of fun. Let me know if you like this new style of video with mostly gameplay and information kind of in the background. Make sure to stop by and check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/AER0___. I'm live every single day, and I will be live right after this video. So as always, make sure to do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, etc. All of those things are super important and really help me out. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all watching. And as always, take care.